They thought I had no power left, until one click erased their control and ended them. Welcome to my new story.
The cameras were already rolling when he said it. Let's have the assistant step aside. His voice was smooth, confident, meant for investors, not for me. I stood beside the prototype display of our AI logistics platform, wearing a simple navy suit and a badge that still listed me as operations coordinator. I had never corrected the title. It kept people comfortable. Ethan Hale, our newest executive partner and the son of our largest shareholder, smiled at the crowd as if he had built the company himself. As if the last 7 years of sleepless nights, risk assessments, and system architecture belonged to him. He didn't know I was Rose Bennett, founder, majority stakeholder, the mind behind every line of code running on that stage. He only saw a woman adjusting cables. Weeks earlier, he had begun positioning me out of leadership meetings, quietly reframing my risk control protocols as overcautious, convincing the board that fresh leadership meant faster profits. Today was supposed to be his announcement. He stepped forward. "Under new direction," he said, gesturing toward the massive screen behind him. "We're accelerating." The applause began. That's when I pressed the small black remote in my palm. Owner override. The screen froze mid-animation. The live demo server disconnected. Every interface in the room shifted to a locked authorization page displaying a single line. Primary control, Rose Bennett. Silence replaced applause. Ethan laughed at first, thought it was a glitch. "It seems," I said calmly, stepping forward, "that acceleration requires authorization." I explained the override protocol, the clause embedded in our founding documents. Any strategic pivot required founder consent, mine. The investors turned, not toward him, toward me. Within minutes, the board requested a private session. Ethan's access credentials were revoked before the press conference ended. By evening, his executive contract was suspended pending review. By week's end, his father resigned from the board to avoid conflict allegations. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I documented everything, every email, every maneuver. He called me just the assistant, so I reminded everyone who owned the system, and I took back my company. The meeting was labeled strategic restructuring. It happened behind closed doors, without me. I found out by accident. A calendar notification forwarded to the wrong email thread. My name missing from the attendee list. My title, Founder and Chief Architect, replaced with Transitioning Executive. They thought I wouldn't notice. For 8 years, I built Aurelian Dynamics from a rented warehouse into a defense-grade software contractor. I wrote the original infrastructure, secured the patents, negotiated the first round of funding when no one believed in the concept. Now the board believed in someone else, Marcus Vale. Polished, aggressive, promising faster scaling and leaner compliance. My safety protocols, the very systems that protected our clients, were suddenly framed as delays. They planned to vote me out the morning of our largest product launch. I didn't argue. I didn't confront them. I reviewed the shareholder agreement instead. Buried within Section 12 was a clause I had insisted on during incorporation. Founder-controlled launch authorization. Any public deployment required dual authentication, mine included. The ballroom was full. Investors, journalists, government liaisons, cameras aligned toward the massive digital wall where our predictive defense platform would go live. Marcus stood center stage, confident, already speaking as if the transition was complete. "Under new leadership," he began, "we are streamlining innovation." Applause rippled. I stood near the technical console, hands steady. When he gave the cue for activation, I declined the secondary authorization request. On screen, instead of the live system, a compliance notice appeared. Deployment suspended. Founder authorization pending. The room shifted instantly, whispering. Phones lighting up. Marcus turned toward the tech crew, irritated. Fix it. I stepped forward. It's functioning exactly as designed, I said calmly. Our launch cannot proceed without the architect who built it. Silence pressed heavier than the applause had. Within an hour, the board convened privately. Legal counsel reviewed the clause I had protected for years. By evening, the vote to remove me was withdrawn pending governance review. Marcus's contract was frozen the next day. They tried to erase me quietly, so I shut down the launch publicly and reminded them that you cannot remove the foundation without collapsing the building. Are appointing new leadership to guide Orion Biotech into its next chapter. A slide appeared behind him. My position, my office, my company. Replaced. The audience applauded politely, unaware that I was standing 10 feet away near the technical control desk, badge still reading Chief Operations Officer, the title he had just erased. For 9 years, I built Orion from a research grant and a borrowed lab. I negotiated compliance approvals, designed a distribution framework, secured every regulatory clearance that allowed Daniel's aggressive expansion strategy to look impressive. He joined 2 years ago, brought in by venture capital, loud, visionary, careless. Behind closed doors, he called my methods slow, told the board we needed younger energy, claimed I was resistant to change. What he didn't understand was governance. As founding officer, I retained administrative authority over core system credentials, including executive network access and licensing authentication. He finished his speech with a promise. We are accelerating growth. The screen behind him shifted to the live research dashboard. Then it froze. Executive access revoked. Daniel paused, laughed lightly. Technical delay. I stepped forward, calm. It's not a delay, I said. It's a permissions adjustment. Every executive credential linked to his ID had just been suspended. Email, server access, regulatory portal authentication, even building entry. Murmurs replaced applause. I explained clearly that no leadership transition could occur without board ratification and compliance filing. Neither had been completed. His announcement violated corporate governance policy. Legal counsel moved quickly. Investors grew quiet. Within hours, an emergency review was called. Daniel's unauthorized public declaration was documented as misconduct. By morning, his contract was terminated for breach of fiduciary duty. He thought replacing me required a microphone. It required authority. He announced my replacement on stage, so I revoked his access and ended his career without raising my voice. The word appeared in the board memo. Obsolete. Not outdated technology. Not declining performance. Me. After a decade of building Varela infrastructure from a regional consultancy into a national engineering firm, my leadership was suddenly described as misaligned with modern growth strategy. Translation: I refused to cut safety audits to inflate quarterly margins. The new board members, installed after a private equity acquisition, preferred speed over structure, risk over responsibility. They smiled in meetings, then rewrote policies behind closed doors. I listened. They said I was cautious, procedural, resistant. They scheduled a vote to transition me into an advisory role, decorative, powerless. What they forgot was that I negotiated the acquisition myself. Buried inside the merger agreement was a protective covenant, a continuity clause requiring unanimous executive consent for any leadership restructuring within the first 3 years post-acquisition. My signature included. They assumed I would resign quietly, preserve reputation, avoid confrontation. Instead, I requested a formal session with legal present. The conference room was polished glass and controlled optimism. They presented performance slides, growth charts, carefully phrased disappointment. I let them finish. Then I referenced Section 8.4 of the acquisition contract, read it aloud, calmly, precisely. Silence settled in layers. The clause was clear. Any attempt to alter executive authority without my written consent constituted material breach, triggering financial penalties and immediate review by regulatory auditors. Their counsel confirmed it. Faces shifted. Confidence thinned. I offered them a choice: honor the existing governance structure and retract the motion, or proceed. and face breach litigation that would freeze capital deployment for months. By the end of the week, 2 board members submitted voluntary resignations citing strategic realignment. The restructuring proposal was withdrawn. Publicly, it was described as a mutual decision. Privately, they understood. Leadership is not obsolete because it values discipline. It becomes dangerous when underestimated. They labeled my authority outdated, so I used one clause and forced their resignation without raising my voice. The humiliation was deliberate. It happened during the quarterly partner summit in a room filled with investors, analysts, and senior staff. Adrian Cole adjusted his cufflinks, glanced at my presentation slide, and smiled. "Perhaps next time," he said into the microphone, "we'll have someone with actual executive experience lead strategy." A few people laughed, nervous, polite. I stood beside the screen, hands steady. My name, Rose Bennett, Chief Strategy Officer, still visible in the corner of the slide he had just dismissed. For 6 years, I built the expansion model that doubled our firm's valuation. I negotiated cross-border contracts, rewrote compliance frameworks, cleaned up risks Adrian never saw because I absorbed them before they reached his desk. But recently, he needed a distraction. Revenue had slowed after he approved a reckless acquisition against internal advice. My advice. Rather than acknowledge the error, he reframed me as the obstacle. Too cautious, too analytical, not visionary enough. The public comment wasn't spontaneous, it was positioning. What Adrian underestimated was documentation. I archived every email where I advised against the acquisition, every risk memorandum he ignored, every internal audit flag overridden with his digital authorization. I didn't confront him that day. I waited. 2 months later, during the annual governance review, investors requested clarity on declining margins. Adrian prepared a confident narrative about market fluctuations. Before he finished, I requested permission to present supplementary documentation. The screen shifted. Time-stamped correspondence, signed approvals, risk assessments bearing his electronic signature, clear patterns of override, no accusations, just evidence. The room grew still. Board members exchanged looks. Legal counsel began taking notes. Adrian attempted to interrupt, but the chronology spoke without emotion. By week's end, an independent compliance investigation was initiated. Within a month, Adrian resigned, citing personal reasons. The press release was controlled. The reputation damage was not. He tried to humiliate me publicly. So I documented everything. And when the moment came, I let the truth dismantle him piece by piece, without raising my voice. By the time the acquisition closed, they had already stripped my title. Founder became consultant. Decision maker became advisor. They left me a corner office with no staff and assumed I would fade quietly while the new executive team rebranded the company I built. For 11 years, I engineered Helix Grid's cybersecurity architecture from a 2-person startup into a government-certified defense contractor. Every firewall layer, every encryption key hierarchy, every emergency failsafe, including one protocol no one discussed after the buyout, Project Sentinel. The new CEO, Grant Mercer, preferred visibility over vigilance. He dismissed layered security audits as excessive spending. He assured shareholders that modernization required streamlining legacy controls. Legacy controls. That was his word for my work. Behind closed doors, they reassigned my department, revoked budget authority, removed my name from external filings. Publicly, they framed it as evolution. Privately, they believed I no longer had operational access. They were wrong. Sentinel was embedded into the system architecture as a founder-authorized contingency measure. In the event of governance instability or security compromise, it would trigger automatic compliance lockdown, suspending external data exchange and freezing executive credentials until a full audit cleared the threat. Activation required one biometric confirmation: mine. The breaking point came during a high-profile defense summit where Grant announced aggressive data-sharing partnerships that bypassed internal review. The audience applauded the ambition. I reviewed the partnership documents. Unauthorized exposure risk. Non-compliant jurisdictions. Direct violation of the regulatory safeguards I negotiated years earlier. They thought I had no power left. So I initiated Sentinel. Within seconds, external network channels closed. Executive dashboards displayed a compliance hold notification. Government liaisons in the room received automated alerts referencing internal security concerns. Applause dissolved into confusion. Grant attempted to frame it as a system error, but regulatory officers requested immediate documentation. Legal teams intervened before the presentation resumed. An independent audit followed. 3 weeks later, Grant resigned under board pressure. 2 executives were formally censured for governance breaches. Sentinel was deactivated after compliance verification. They believed authority came from titles. It doesn't. It comes from architecture. They thought I had no power left, until I activated the protocol that ended them.